It's the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast, where we talk about all things consensual non-monogamy, polyamory, swinging, and all things about how you can have a secure and sexy relationship. Now here's your hosts, Tara and André. Well, we are finally reunited.
So today's topic, five
ways to reignite the fire in your long-term relationship.
At least 5 ways.
Well, there's at least 5 ways. We're going to talk about 5 ways.
And we might not get to all of them.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot to be said, right?
Yeah.
A lot to be said.
I think it's important to say that reigniting the fire in relationships is more than just about people who are polyamorous. This is for anybody who's in a long-term relationship.
Yeah, sure.
So whether you're monogamous, polyamorous, swinger, new to open relating, whatever. I think it's something that comes up in all relationships.
Right. Is it fair to say that the model we'll be using when we're talking about this is, however, primarily for kind of like a coupled model as opposed
like
to being
partner?
solo poly or in a poly or something? Is it? Because some of the things we're going to talk about, like when we talk about going away and then coming back, for example, that's with a one-to-one model, right? I mean, it could be used in other cases, but for argument's sake, for examples.
The examples I think we're going to use are for partnered situations where you have someone who you're in a long-term relationship with and partnered with and possibly nesting with or not. But I mean, I think some of the same principles though apply to soul. It's just a little bit different if you're if you practice solo polyamory.
Right. Okay.
Because some of your issues may be more around seeing the person rather than being apart,
right? Depending
on what your partner's relational identity is. Like if they have a longer term relationship where they're nesting, then it could be a situation whereas the person who's solo polyamorous does not get enough time and they want to have more time together. So anyway, let's jump in. So, I think when you have a long-term partner or people, when we grow up with these ideals of being partnered with someone, getting married and that sort of thing, we have this idea that our person is going to be both our best friend, but also like our erotic partner. But I think the thing that, we've learned and the research shows, and that probably we won't experience in our own lives, is that these two things can push against each other. Yeah. So on one hand, you want that place that feels secure. You have the love, the familiarity, the predictability. It feels like your safe haven and secure base.
Yeah.
But then you want, like when you first meet someone, the excitement, unpredictability, the surprises, and that sort of thing.
I want to just clarify for a second what we mean by
safe haven and secure base.
And secure base. Secure base being what? A place from which, well, just like it sounds, right? As a place from which we might be able to launch from. We feel secure that this is a good relationship and we feel comfortable in it and we can launch from there like a spaceship base, right? We go from there. Yeah. And then where do we come back when we've done our journey? We want to come back to a secure haven. Right?
Yeah.
We want to feel as though we're well received in it. We're able to reconnect. We feel secure in that sense. Right?
It's like those are kind of the principles which many say are around secure attachment, that you can have that safe haven and you can have the secure place. So like the safe haven, if you have issues, things come up, someone to talk to, someone to support you and that sort of thing. But then the secure base being, I can go out and learn and grow as an individual, but I can come back to you and you are form that base for me.
But I think it's important to recognize that we can have this, or we might also identify when we feel as though we're not quite having these things, right? So, can we help to promote and foster those things if we're feeling as though they're not quite where we want them to be? But we're going on the premise that we do have these things now, they're in place, and now we might enjoy them, right? We might use them to our benefit. So it's the idea that we might have this kind of relationship and then create ways to keep it interesting, create that secure attachment, but then also have the mystery, the longing for, the desire for, and then we come back into that.
Like we want that safe and stable base. And that's when we're looking to fall in love and that sort of thing, that's the idea that we have from it. But like we were talking about, when you want to have desire and the fire and the excitement, it's like when you first meet, right? It's like once you get to know someone for a long period of time, it's not the same. People are more challenged to keep that desires. And that's what we're talking about today.
Right. Some people said we become more familiar, and we kind of, I think, start to make assumptions. Right? We assume that the person's automatically going to be this way. We think that we know them. We feel that we know them. And we might even go so far as to, at times, take them for granted or have ourselves be taken for granted. And we want to see if we can challenge that, right? Make sure that we don't just go into assumptions, but find ways of keeping that desire and fire alive.
I think when you're in long-term relationships, and I think this happens a lot to people, and it's happened to me, is you start to identify as a we rather than a me and you. And I think once it becomes a we and you become so intertwined, I think that's when you lose that mystery and excitement and desire.
But I can understand that becoming a product of, but it's born from that desire to want to be coupled, right? That we do get a lot of wonderful things from it. So it's really trying to find that balance between how do we enjoy the security of being coupled and that, but also get the excitement of feeling individuated and then being able to return back to that position.
I think because once you start adding, like, especially if you're living together, and I mean, we've experienced this more when we've been nesting a bit more, is like you get caught up a bit in some of the domestic things. And if people have children and stuff like that, it's like, we got to fill the dishwasher, we got to like clean the house, got to get the kids to soccer, whatever it is. And that kind of fills up your entire day, and then we lose touch with the parts of our sexuality or the connection with us as individuals and erotic partners.
As you say that, filling the day up and all the things that we have to do, all those taxes that we might have on us, it's kind of like if we look at it as the economy of our relationship, right? So now we're paying to do the soccer, we're paying to do the dishwasher, we're paying, and all these things chop up our dollar. And then at the end of the day, at 11 or 12 o'clock, if there's anything left, well, then it's like, hey, what about our time?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of like the idea about saving, right? So we're going to pay all our bills, and if there's anything left at the end of the, we'll put it in savings. Very often there's not.
Yeah.
It's often suggested that we pay ourselves first, right?
Yes.
So we take 5 or 10% of that, put it into our savings, our investments, and we live off the rest. And you know what? Somehow we find a way to do it. Well, what if we prioritize ourselves this way as well, right? So we have all these obligations, but where do we fall on that? Are we putting ourselves as the primary, or are we just as valid as all these other demands? So how can we keep that in mind when we are allocating these times? Where are we going to fit into this? Because, sex at the end of the day is fun, but sometimes when we're tired, it's kind of like, sleep is sounding pretty good as well, maybe even better than.
Especially if you're going to be getting up, like, I have a pretty rigorous morning routine, and, I prioritize the time that works for me to do exercise is early in the morning, and it starts off my whole routine. And if you're going to be getting up at 5:45 or 5:30 or whatever time it is, it's like, you're not going to want to be having, and you're not going to be feeling like you want to have intimacy at 11 o'clock at night. You'll be like, I need to sleep.
But see, another thing about that, and I'm glad you used the word routine, is that what happens is we have all these demands, they set our routine, we become adjusted to that, but then we might also have the idea, well, if I don't make love tonight at 11 p.m. because I'm kind of tired, I'll have it tomorrow. It's like we set this as part of the routine now. It's like, well, if I don't do it right now, there's always tomorrow. And we might start then to become a little bit assuming we are taking for granted that there will be tomorrow. But tomorrow might look a lot like today's, where we come to 11 o'clock tonight and how about we just, and like, I'm okay too, because I'm tired too. And boom, we fall into, and we've created this routine. But it becomes in the idea that we're assuming that there's going to be, now, if you and I were not coupled, not nesting, and we were on a date, we might not necessarily think that behavior is going to be as viable or as accepted. We might say, well, wait a second, like, I'm on a date here. And if I just say, I'm kind of tired, like, let's do another date. Maybe we do, but it might also be kind of like, well,
this is our opportunity.
Right. And if you're not that interested, if you're not that important, if other things are, I understand, but is it as gratifying? Is it as wonderful? Are we living our best selves?
Well, you just made me think, actually, because part of the coaching, I do some accountability coaching for a health and fitness program. And one of the things we talk about is habits. And so, like I just said 2 seconds ago, it's like I've really fully ingrained my habit of getting up and my habit loop around getting up in the morning and exercise and being very rigorous about my morning routine. But I'm actually not rigorous about our sexual routines. That's really interesting. Yeah. Maybe a new habit is something to create.
Well, and also the consciousness of routine, right? So, yes, we like certain routines. So I like to brush my teeth in the morning, brush my teeth at night, and yada, yada, yada. But am I doing that in a conscious decision? And do we do that in our relationships, right? Have we decided that that's how it's going to be? I come home from the end of the day, and the first thing I do is I throw my briefcase on the chair and I take off my overcoat, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? And, off we go. On our first date, I doubt very much that's how our reception was. We probably stood in each other's presence. We were very close to each other. We might have looked each other in the eye. We might have felt each other's breath, and we might have wanted to lean in to have that kiss. There's that anticipation. We were present. And so can we break the routine that has been kind of just developed organically? Can we have more consciousness? Can I come home and say, you know what, before I unload all that other stuff and get into that routine, can I interrupt it and say, well, you know what, I was once present with you. I want to return to being present with you. I want to see you and be seen by you. And can we afford a 30-second hug at the door, or 5-second kiss, whatever it might be, something that's going to interrupt some of the routine that's not serving us quite as well, that's not as wonderful, as romantic, as interesting.
But I think what's also interesting to point out, if people are non-monogamous and they are seeing other people, so if you have a longer term relationship, perhaps if you're married or nesting or just seeing someone more regularly, and then you throw in the possibility that there's other people who are maybe not as predictable or there or present, and we're not so familiar with it, it can make it, that NRE, the new relationship energy that we have with them, can cause a bit of a threat, I guess you could say, or it can cause a concern in our own relationship,
right. So,
that something's lacking or...
Sure. Well, something is lacking in a sense. So what happens is you and I have a relationship, it's established. I kind of know we have this routine that we talk about, right? Whether it's the actual routine or the psychic routine, and we have this thing. And then all of a sudden, there's another variable that's introduced. You start seeing somebody, I start seeing somebody, and now my attention might focus or shift or have something. So if we look at the economy of our relationship as $1, and there's 100 units, and all of a sudden I'm focusing somewhere else, it might mean that you're going to be getting a little bit less of it. And very often, that will manifest in what people often call jealousy. They'll feel as though one of their needs, one of their levels of something is not quite where it once was, and we're alerted by it. There's a shift in the homostatic needle, and we say, wait, I'm getting too much or not enough of this.
Homostatic. Can you say that again?
Well, it's homostasis.
Homostasis.
Right? So it's a homostatic needle that's telling us that something is shifted, something is up, and now I have these other new feelings. So it was once there, it might have been routine, might have been wonderful, whatever it was, but the NRE energy, as fantastic as that is, as much as we want to share in compersion, we might still feel a little affected by it. So that's where all that good stuff is going to come from, right?
What are you laughing at?
Well, okay, so now we become more aware of it. We're having a dialogue about it, but how are we now going to address these feelings? I still want to enjoy the NRE, but don't want you to feel as though you're being neglected, and you want me to enjoy the NRE, but don't want to feel as though it's coming at the cost of your receiving. How do we negotiate this, and how do we say this is what we might be wanting?
So how do we have that safety, predictability, protection, love, all those things, but also all the excitement, and have that balanced out, especially if you're you're consensually non-monogamous. So we want to get unsmothered and bring the desire and excitement back. So
smothering makes me think of the quote you're reading about fire and air.
Yes.
To smother fire is to take away air.
Yes.
Right. So when we are too dependent on each other, codependent, we are too much. Where does that come from? Well, NRE can bring some of that, but how can we tote that line where it's enough of desire that there's like missing a little bit of air, but enough air that's going to be able to let it breathe?
Yeah, fire needs air for sure. So, all right. So 5 ways to reignite the fire or keep it lit in your longer term relationship. So here's the 5 things. We'll give you the list, and then we're going to, we did touch on a bit of each of them, but we're going to dive into at least one of them today. So,
and this will not be exhaustive, right? I mean, we're probably not going to get to the end, which makes me think of PIV, right? And the idea.
How did you get to that?
Well, because we have 5 points that we want to talk about in this, right? In reigniting the fire. But we might not get to all of them. And that's kind of like the idea of, sensate or whatever, that we resist the idea of just being destination oriented, that we don't necessarily always have to have PIV. We don't have to have orgasm to have a good time. We can be connected. And in fact, that delay of gratification might in some ways be kind of enticing. So we have like a little fool around in the morning, but without it being the whole end all,
Mhm.
it reduces the expectation and pressure, but also might leave us looking forward to something in the future to want.
Right. And we don't have to have PIV at all.
No, sometimes we need to.
No, but some the
Oh,
way
at all, ever. I thought you were okay.
no, some people that's not a priority. That's
No,
not how
That's
they
true. No, some people don't. Yeah, I mean,
there's relationships where
there's all kinds of relationships, and
there
PIV is
that's not even a
one.
thing.
That's
So
not
I just want
There
to
are
say that.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
No, I get your point. You were trying to make the point that we don't have to be always orgasm destination oriented.
Exactly.
That was the point.
Right.
And you were using that as an example.
Right. So there's 5 things we want to
understand.
talk about. We might not get to all of them, but that's okay. It's the process, not the destination.
All right. So the 5 things. I'm going to list them out. This is the first time we've been together in the same room in a while.
Mhm.
Okay. So number 1,
Mhm.
have some distance, spend time apart.
Number 2.
I know you're so excited today.
I'm gonna try to be present and in the moment. Number 2 would be to be present.
Yes.
So I'm racing ahead into future forecasting. I get very excited and I want to go there. So we will be present. So look in each other's eyes.
Mhm.
Maybe even get close enough to feel each other's breath. Don't get too close. It's a family show. And
Is it a family show? I think it's an over 18 show.
Oh, well over 18.
Well over 18.
It's a family show. My mom's here. Hi, Mom. Hey, Maman. Bonjour, Mama. Okay, so number 2 is be present.
Yeah.
Number 3 is
interrupt patterns and routines.
As we were saying before, coming through the door.
Mm-hmm.
There's other ways, yeah. And 4, increase sexual erotic energy. Increase sexual erotic energy. Sometimes I feel like there might already be sufficient levels of erotic energy. But okay, well, I'm curious to know.
For some people, there aren't.
Well, for some people, there aren't.
And it's a big jump. Like even just being present with, people, like with someone that they love is hard.
Yeah.
Because we've come out of the routine of like really like looking in each other's eyes and you know what I mean? So this is why it's kind of like a bit of a.
Well, you spoke of sexual erotic energy. Where does emotional energy fall in that? The idea of being present? Because when I think about being present with you, I don't necessarily think about it in the sexual erotic point, more of an emotional connection for me.
That's what I mean by be present.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And then
be present in a number of ways.
Yeah. And the number 5 is doing something different that takes deliberate effort. Yeah. Well, I think it's like under increased sexual and erotic energy, you might have spontaneity in there. There's also the idea that we can't just wait to be spontaneous or to be struck by the idea of desire. So that's the meaning of that one.
So if the opportunity presents itself, wonderful, go for it, try and be fun and gay and engaging. But if it doesn't, what can we do to create those opportunities? How can we create that? Okay.
Yeah. So let's start with the first one. And we've talked a bit about this, about having some distance and spending time apart.
So right away, when I think about that, I think about attachment ideas, right? So attachment or insecure attachment, right? Whether we are anxious or we are overly invested in it, whatever position might be. So here I am. Let's say, for example, I'll use myself as an example. I come into this relationship and I have fairly secure attachment formations, but I also have some anxiety towards getting too close or having people get too close.
No. Are you talking about you specifically?
No, some hypothetical guy looks just like me, sounds just me, even sure to see me, but it's not me.
Okay.
So I allow myself to kind of be connected in relationships. I'm attaching. And now I have this idea, well, it might be good for me to have some distance as well, or to let my friend have some distance. But it might also bring up some feelings of anxiety towards that idea, right? It makes me think back to, may I say, peekaboo.
Yes, peekaboo.
Right, so peekaboo. So that is the classic game where the object, the mother or the parent, the father, whoever it is, closes their eyes and they're gone from the baby and all of a sudden they reappear. Peekaboo, and they're here. So what happens is we close our eyes, the object is gone, we feel a heightened sense of anxiety. Oh no, where did they go? And then all of a sudden, voila, they reappear and we feel elated. We're relieved. The tension is gone.
And we laugh, and like babies laugh and are excited.
Secure. We have that secure attachment again. There's the object. I'm attached. It's all good. Well, we're kind of recreating this as adults now. We're saying, I'm with you. I see you, but now I'm going to be gone. So the anxiety comes up. Oh no, where's my object? Where's that person? I'm gone. can I also self-soothe, calm myself and say, wait a second, I played peekaboo before. I know that I can leave and come back. They can leave and come back. And we are well served by that. We know that it is a survivable function. But it also, in playing peekaboo, helps us to individuate. It helps us to say, I am secure at my own feelings. So even if I feel somewhat anxious in my attachment styles, even if I'm afraid of losing them, I know that it's survivable, that I am okay. Even if they don't come back, I will be there.
Okay.
You look like you've got a lot of stuff on your mind.
No, but I was thinking, as you were talking, I was thinking about this idea that some people, especially if you're in a longer term relationships, might think, oh, the problem with them is they spend too much time apart. But I guess it's like, it's more around, I think, your identity, around who you are as an individual and doing things as an individual rather than just always spending time apart. Like, that's not what I'm suggesting. Like, you probably like know relationships where the partners spend all their time doing other things with other friends and stuff and never see each other. So I think it's a little bit different. It's more
is that an avoidance?
That's more of a, like, I don't think that's what we're suggesting. So then I was like, oh, we were talking, I was like, oh, I hope people don't think we're suggesting that if you're in a long-term relationship, like, just go bugger off and do your own things. You know what I mean? Yeah. But what I'm talking about is not necessarily like going golfing, like not avoiding your partner or spending quality time together, but is more seeing oneself as an individual and what makes you up as an individual. Because I think that's part of the mystery. When we first start dating someone, there's this person that has all these interests and things which we find fascinating. Like, I thought it was really cool when I met you, and I could tell from your body that you played hockey, and I thought that was really cool. So, I don't know, there's just stuff about that. So I didn't want to suggest that we do things together to avoid, but more to discover aspects of ourselves and not constantly see ourselves as a we. And to get more of that peekaboo excitement of returning.
But what if we do become well acquainted with each other? Does that necessarily dictate that we're going to become rather complacent with each other? So does familiarity breed contempt? If we become too well known to each other, do we have this idea that the mystery's gone? Because we were kind of having that discussion, and I brought up the example of my grandparents, how they were, they met each other in their teens and were sexually interested in each other and romantically, emotionally interested in each other until their 80s. So they knew each other fairly well. I mean, they had like a whole long life together, but they were still able to maintain that. So how could we still know each other and yet still maintain some degree of mystery and curiosity?
Well, I think that's why you want to have some mystery about your partner. I think the difference too, I've been reading Esther Perel's oh my God, what's the name of the book? I can't remember now. Anyways, it's just over there. But they were talking about how it's different. Relationships are different, a little bit different now, because objects of desire, there's lots of objects of desire closer at hand than there may have been when your grandparents were younger. So there wasn't as much candy out there to distract us.
Interesting. So while there's an abundance of this, it might actually, though, work against us, right? Because we become rather disposable. Quick, click right, click left. There's always another one behind that.
Yeah, like we have this belief we can have everything and we should have everything. And so when it's available and we feel there's a deficiency in our relationship, it can tend to draw us away.
So rather than addressing that, if there's too much resistance, if there's too much difficulty, too much consideration, we might simply then say, well, you know what, the next person will probably be easier.
Yeah.
So our relationship becomes kind of stale. I know that when he comes through the end of the door, he's basically just going to take off his coat and throw his thing there, and he's going to say hi and whatever. So what we're suggesting is we're going to break that routine. We're going to find ways to keep it fresh and new. So when there is an indication of some kind of lull or assumptions, we can make a concerted effort to find other ways to address that rather than just dispose of each other.
And part of that is keeping that mystery. That's what I believe. I mean, is it okay to give an example from Saturday?
Since you've opened the door, let's do it. Which example are you speaking?
I was out in the town by myself. But there was two reasons for that. One was you had made plans and you had a date Saturday night. So what it was for me was an opportunity to go out and do something on my own and do something that maybe you wouldn't enjoy as much.
Ooh, yeah. You went to a movie.
I went to a movie that you would never see in a million years. But it was fun for me to do that. So I got the opportunity to explore and the city because I just came back and go for a nice long walk and see a movie and then come back.
So you weren't just feeling as though you were getting out of the way or fulfilling this first example that we should create distance, but you were doing it in a way that was serving you well. You were doing something that you might not go to as readily had you been with me, because I probably would not have wanted to see that film. So it was an opportunity for you to have your own way.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. And then when I came back, what was it like?
Oh, it's quite nice. We reconnected.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you were excited to see me.
Yeah. What did you want to hear? I feel like you're suggesting something.
No.
I always like to see you. Well, it was wonderful to see
Except that I was food deprived, so I was a little bit, when I came in the door, I was not doing so well. But that was so weird. But anyway.
Yeah. But it felt good to see you because it was the second part of the peekaboo. You had returned, and I felt as though we were able to reconnect.
Yeah, and I was excited to get home. Like, as I was walking back to you, despite feeling super hungry, I was also super excited to see you. Yeah. And also, like, sort of share in your, like, have a compersion and share in the happiness of your evening. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. That's when it works out well. Can you think back to other times when you and I might have wanted to participate in this distancing practice, but then feel as though it was not so easy to come back or reconnect, or there might have been things that made it less attainable? Can you think back to that?
Do you have a specific example? I'm thinking about, because we wrote in the notes about, if you are going to detach and do something separate, if someone has a date, because I think sometimes people have this hard time especially when they're opening up in polyamory to begin with. It's like, when their partner has a date, and what do you do? And we were talking about practicing some before care. So, detaching with love and
having something to do.
Yeah. Detaching from a secure base, like feeling like I'm going to go do this thing on my own. You're going to have your experience on your date, and then coming back and having some aftercare. And aftercare can look like there could be during care too. Sometimes we text each other and say hello. Yeah. For you messaged me to say, I could come. I could.
My date was over.
Your date was over. I could come home, and which was perfect timing. But the aftercare and reattaching, you know what I mean, was super important. And I think, and what you did differently this Saturday, like one situation, maybe this is what you're thinking of, or maybe I'm just imagining, I had come back after you had a date, and one of our sort of agreements is that if there is sexual activity in the bed, that we change the bed. And when I arrived home, the bed was not made. It was stripped, but not made.
But it was in the process of being stripped.
Yeah, but it wasn't remade. Whereas today, like on Saturday, I got home and you had already taken all the bed sheets off, put them in the wash, and remade the bed. Okay, and so that was a nice gesture. Like it was noticed.
Well, that's a good transition. But what I was thinking of while you were saying that was the idea of that aftercare. Can we reconnect? And one of the, one of the manifestations, one of the symptoms of the jealousy is the idea that, am I going to lose out in some way? So did you give that attention that I would normally receive to the other person? And does that make me feel, insecure? Where's my attention? Where's my piece of that pie? Now it's been shared with somebody else. So when you come home and you see the bed being remade, it's in a way saying symbolically, I've dedicated this attention to you. I'm realizing it. And this is a gesture to show that you're still important to me. I went to the effort to remake the bed to show you that you're still in my thoughts.
Yeah. And you greeted me at the door with very much love and attention, and it was lovely. Yeah. I was thinking of something else and I can't think of what I was going to say.
It's always the way.
It's always the way. Where are we? One of the ways of creating mystery and excitement or keeping the fire lit is having some time alone and not losing yourself. I think that happens in relationships. Like people say that people start to look like each other, but sometimes you start to act the same. You have the same interests. You lose the connection with your friends. You start doing activities only together. Yeah. And then it becomes this thing. And then if people are opening up in polyamory, like this whole idea of disentangling from that can be challenging.
Right.
And one of the first things that's suggested is like find you again.
Mm-hmm. But it's so interesting you say that about like our becoming looking like each other in a way, because I think on some level, unconscious or otherwise, we are wanting to find ourselves, right? We want to find people who have shared interests about ourselves. We like the things that we see in them because they often resonate with ourselves, right?
Right.
So in the sense, it's kind of narcissistic. It's rather understood that it should be that way.
Maybe, but then there's also the idea that opposites attract, and there's
too.
Parts about people that are different than us that we find really appealing. Like
Yeah.
you're very playful and spontaneous, and I can be those things, but I'm less so, I'd say. Wouldn't you?
At times, yeah.
At times.
Yeah, the opposites can attract. But I want to say one last thing. I want to ask, rather, if I may.
Okay.
So let's go into a scenario. You have a date. You did
Mhm.
well. I had a date. You did well. You went out. You found something that was of interest to you. You went out and you did it. You felt that that was a good use of your time. And then you came back and were well received. You felt as though it was easy, viable to reconnect. You have a date tonight, hypothetically, whatever. And I go out, but I'm not as well functioning. I'm not quite as secure. I go out and there's not really, I can't do my thing. We're not showing my film at that hour. My game is not accessible, whatever it is.
Mhm.
And I'm more than holding myself, wanting to be held. You're busy doing your thing, and I don't have that same level of fluidity in being able to self-soothe, to hold myself. What could I do then? So if my first choice isn't there, if my other things are there, how can I regain the knowledge of our secure relationship, of our secure attachment? How can I import that in myself, knowing that I am still secure? Do you have any ideas how we might?
Do you think I have ideas?
I think you always have ideas. That's what's fun.
Well, I mean, maybe it's simple to put it this way, but if there isn't that object of your desire that you do on your own available, it's like, can I remember instances where I felt that way in terms of your partnership?
Okay, so draw back on past experiences, past times,
like
things that we did know.
Yeah,
Collect
collecting the
positive
evidence.
The positive evidence.
Yeah, the positive evidence. The evidence that supports the belief you want to have. The belief you want to have and the feeling you want to have is that my relationship is good. We are connected. We love each other. We desire each other. And then collecting the evidence and remembering instances where that happened. Your positive stack.
Positive stack. Okay,
Yeah.
good to know. All right. We'll see how we.
But I would challenge you to find something that you can do that would be fun for you.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I find it easy to find things that are fun to do on my own.
Well, you're curious about everything and you're enthusiastic. You try it at least once, so that's a good thing.
Yeah. Find something new, exciting to do. That's always a good thing.
Yeah, I like the idea of trying to challenge ourselves, right? Going out of our own routine, our own routine of self.
Yeah. I think sometimes people, especially if they're in polyamory, they want to, like, if their partner's having a date, then they're thinking, oh, I should have a date as well the same day. But it doesn't always work out that way. That's why I think it's good to have friends to spend time with, things to do on your own, and that sort of thing. Our little call to action for you today is to think about what things bring you joy you could spend more time doing and that you would have fun to do on your own. And it's good to practice even when your partner doesn't have a date if you're in polyamory, right? Like, let's just go out and do our own things. Like I went out and spent some time with a friend yesterday.
Yeah.
You did other things at home. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then you were excited when I came back.
Sure was.
And I was excited when I came back. We're talking about the 5 ways to reignite the fire in longer term relationships.
Longer term.
Which was having some distance and spending time apart.
And now we're going to talk about number 2.
Being present.
And when we say to be present, it's not just the physical part. We're talking about also being emotionally and sexually present as well, right?
Yeah, because I think there's so many distractions that we have in our life. And when we are present, we're not necessarily present. So let's start with number 1 of the 3, being physically present.
So are we like just showing up physically? And, that's already in itself a start, but is that enough, right? And we'll talk about the quality of showing up physically, but it makes me think back to even the idea of allowing ourselves to be physically present, right? So say, for example, you get invited out to go for breakfast with your buds or to grab a beer. Are you automatically going to say yes, or you find yourself at times perhaps wanting to say no? So are you already defeating yourself in a way by not allowing for that? Can you catch yourself when you are more tempted or more likely to say no and allow yourself to say yes? Right?
Exactly. So this is where you stop and you ask yourself the question, am I being physically present?
Right.
Am I being there? Am I saying no rather than yes?
Right.
Are we hiding away?
Sure.
Like I know some couples where, and I'll admit guilty on my part to this, is that you're in the same space, but you separate yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So you might go to bed early,
right.
Hide away, avoid your partner.
Yeah.
Oops. I got to delete them. Okay, we'll just
Never.
leave them. They're just going to keep coming, though. That's the problem.
We're getting these interesting offerings in the chat here.
This
but
is what happens when we go to YouTube. Okay, so are we being physically present? So, like I was saying, you can be in the same room, but not in the same room in terms of your.
Well, it makes me think of like, having to go to a business meeting, for example, right? You might show up and be on Zoom these days, whatever. And you're physically there, but you're not really there, right? You're kind of mailing it in. You're not present in your presence.
Exactly. So I just want to say hi to some of the people joining us. Hi, Melissa. Hi,
hello,
those from Stormy, Alabama, doing your washing. Victoria, BC. Anyone else there? Say hello. So
the romper room section. I see Jenny. I see George. I see Tara.
That might have just aged us.
And so what?
Romper room.
No, but are we ageist? Do you have anything against it? I'm an old man.
No, I'm pretty happy about my age.
Yeah, so it ages us. Yes, we are ancient.
Yes.
And loving it.
I mean, speaking of age, just to off on a small detour, I'm turning 50 this year.
50?
Yeah.
You told me 30. Whoa. There goes my 20-year warranty.
Well, and I think
50, really?
50,
wow.
Yeah, 50. But I think
50 is a new hot.
It is the new hot, and I feel like the new hot. And
hot.
I think, the big part of it and why we do what we do, I think, is because we're having more fun and excitement and trying new things. And like, that's why we're here talking to you about this stuff, is like, we want that for you too. So.
But also on the topic of age, I think of me dear old mom, not too old. And she's a woman of a certain age, as they would say. And, she is still as vivacious and as vibrant as she was years ago, and still wanting to have these expressions. This is not a limited time offer, right? Our sexuality, our expression comes with us forever. There are many examples of people being well advanced and still being very sexy and very much enthusiastic about their love and sex life.
Yeah. So no matter the age, if you pay attention and you start to do these things and get help where you need it, you can have more desire and excitement and all that. So that's,
Well, the way we say that a body in motion tends to stay in motion, right? So we go to the gym, we stay active while we're doing this sexual, psychic, emotional energy workout as well. We are keeping ourselves fluid in that way.
Awesome. So we talked about being physically present, but like you said, and what we talked about is being physically present is not just being there is not enough. Which is why we have the number 2 being present is being emotionally present.
Right.
That's sometimes the harder thing.
Well, let's go back for just a second. Okay. So if I feel that I'm physically present, but not quite there, really, well, those feelings or the lack of those feelings are informing me. So we might want to ask, well, what's going on there? So
what is going on there?
Right. Am I wanting to connect, but finding it difficult? Am I concerned about the potential for this, that, and the other thing? What's at play?
Yeah, that's true. Because I think that's what happens when people, come to us in our practices and our private practices, is that, there's something there and they can't really pinpoint it. It's hard to admit to ourselves, some of these things, I think.
Yeah. I think generally in a very simplified form, people come to us in our practices because either they are not feeling enough of the feelings they want to have, or they're feeling too much of the feelings they're having.
Exactly.
And we can help with doing the work we do, help them come to terms with that, become more informed, figure out what's going on, and figure out what is that they're wanting and how to get that.
But I think, you can do that in more of a therapeutic or coaching practice one-on-one, but you can also do it more effectively or even more effectively, I think, in a group situation, like in our program.
Also effectively, yes.
Yeah, also effectively. Okay, let's carry on to number 2, being emotionally present. Carrying on. We are carrying on.
You're always carrying on.
So being emotionally present. So what does that mean? So we can be physically present, but are you also emotionally present? So what is emotionally present?
Yeah, being in touch with our thoughts and feelings for me is the idea of being emotionally feeling, right?
Yeah.
So are we feeling distracted? Are we doing other things? Are we allowing ourselves to just be in the moment, to be emotionally present?
Exactly.
To feel your feelings.
Because I think we can be present, and this goes to when, we're in, we're trying to be intimate with a partner, but we may not be fully engaged in the activity with all of our emotions and things. So it's like when we show up, you gave the example when we were talking this morning about being in a business meeting that we don't want to be in. Are we really there? Like we showed up, but if we're not actively participating and emotionally and active in the moment, we are not actually doing the whole thing. And so I think this is what happens sometimes in longer term relationships. We figure if we are present, that should be enough.
Right. But how are we being present? Are we just wanting to get it over with? Are we kind of like, I think you call it the hit it and quit it kind of deal. Like, let's just, I know that position 69 works well. So do you want to just go to 69 and we'll get it over with? Is it like, but are we avoiding any kind of feelings? Again, it's something to consider, right? What is disallowing ourselves to be as present as we might otherwise be? But why should we even want to be present, really?
Well, why should we? Because I think we get the full experience of being with someone if we're not just physically but emotionally present. And then we're going to get to the third part.
Right.
But I think like you said, I think if we're not being emotionally present, what is that a sign of? And there could be a lot of things going on, but sometimes it's our own avoidance, or sometimes we don't want to deal with the situation that's uncomfortable. But what, thinking about what does it feel like for you to be emotionally present?
Yeah. I was thinking about the reason why, though, just for a second, to go back, why should I want to be emotionally present? And I think because it increases my experience of the time together, right? Because I can mail it in and just be physically present, but I'm not feeling that same level of connection. I'm not feeling that same level of gratification, all those things. So it adds another dimension when I can allow myself to be present, when I receive the benefits of being present.
And we're being asked in the questions by Facebook, what does it look like to be emotionally present? Can you give us an example? Yeah, I think it's, if your mind is wandering onto other things, or just being, you can, in the moment, be curious about what's going on in your thoughts. What are my thoughts? What feelings am I having associated with whatever activity I'm doing? I mean, it's a lot more complicated, I think, than that. But I think it's, theoretically, it sounds easy to be emotionally present. But what,
But how do you know when you're there? How do you know when you are emotionally present? So I think I know when I'm not, when I'm feeling the fear of vulnerability, or feel that I might be too intimate, too close. Maybe I want to buffer that and not be as emotionally present. But what would be an indication of our being emotionally present? And I think it's when I feel that connectedness, when I don't necessarily subscribe to my fears or my anxieties, my inhibitions, all those things. When I feel that I am psychically held either by the other or by myself, and feel that I am contained, that I feel like I am secure in this position, that I feel loved in whatever that might mean, to be loved. So there's a feeling that comes over me. And when I have that feeling, I say, I feel like I'm present. I feel like I'm here with you. I feel seen by you, and I see you.
Yeah, exactly.
Emotionally. So that for me is one of the indicators of being emotionally connected.
What was interesting, I was out on a date with a friend, actually just a friend, not a sexy friend. I don't know why I need to clarify that.
You don't have any friends that aren't sexy? All your friends look like they're sexy, but anyway, go on.
But I mean, with a good girlfriend.
A platonic, I think, is the term.
Platonic is the term. I'm seeing it here on my. And what she said to me was, I was avoiding her eyes.
Oh, interesting.
And I don't know why. I was telling a story, and she's like, "Is everything okay with you?" So that's a good example of me maybe not being emotionally present. And I think, I don't know what was going on with me in the moment. I think I was telling the story and maybe I was uncomfortable with it, or I don't know. Or
the subject matter?
Maybe the subject matter, or that she might have ideas about it, even though I know she wouldn't. So I'm not sure what was going on in that, but she noticed something in me not being emotionally present.
So she alerted you to this, or she offered you, she shared her insight, her feeling about that. How did you receive that? Did it invite you into being more present, or did you were you taken off guard by it, or what was the reaction?
I was like, at first, then I was like noticing that I wasn't looking at her and that I was looking away, and it's like, why am I not looking at her as I'm talking to her. So I think I was more curious about it. I didn't figure out in the moment what it was, but I think this is what happens. It's like, it's hard sometimes to see what's going on inside of us. I think it's why, I think why people, when they come to work with us, it's helpful to, or with whomever, it's helpful to help someone because they can see more sometimes than we can see ourselves.
Sure. But also, I think what might come from a situation like that is the other person shares their feeling, their thought about it, and then it brings it to our consciousness. And then all of a sudden we are perhaps more aware. And we say, well, actually, you know what? Now that I think about it, you're right. I was not feeling as comfortable. I was kind of a little bit further away. But I think a lot of it also depends on who's asking us and how it might be asked. Are they inviting us to it and wanting to help us regain that intimacy, come into it?
Well, we may not be emotionally present because we're trying to protect ourselves. Maybe we doesn't feel safe to be emotionally present with somebody, you know what I mean? And I think if it doesn't, then that's also something that you might want to be aware and conscious of.
Yeah, for sure. And there's, there are things that you can do. You can speak to somebody, a professional, about that and find ways to allow for that expression, to become better acquainted with it, more secure in it, less vulnerable.
But if you're with somebody who you've been with a long time and it's just a matter of you've become more friends or strangers in the same location, friends or strangers, in your location, right. Can you imagine, or if maybe there's hurt or resentments, like we said, and that you're holding on to those and it's preventing you from being connected and emotionally present. So can you imagine what might happen in your relationship if you could be present and shift in your desire, like what the shift would be in your desire and pleasure if you were more emotional with your partner.
Right. Great question.
Because I think, we talked about this morning, about hurt and resentment, and we did a whole talk on resentment. I think the thing that you pointed out is, I think we hold on to our resentment.
Right.
And, what would happen if we can release it? Like, can we suspend it momentarily to allow for emotional connection with someone where where it's in a safe situation, of course. Right. Like we might approach, say, exercise routine, like we don't want to start to exercise because you're afraid of it, right? It might be painful. It might be hard. We might fail and that sort of thing. Or it might not be this particular thing, Zumba might not be the thing for you.
Right.
It's the same, maybe not the same, but like you can talk about your hurt and resentment. What if you could suspend it?
So we become aware that we might have a position of resentment and we are in fact bringing that forward with us. It taxes our own psychic economy. It's an inside job. We attach that amount of value. It's interesting, speaking to couples that we work with, very often when they have a long successful relationship, I might ask them, well, what are some of the components? And one of the things they say is, well, we know what's important and what's not important. So there are things that we might attach more importance to than necessary, or things that we're able to minimize. So am I making a big deal of this? So to let go of the resentment, it's not necessarily just saying that, oh, it's not important, but how will I be affected by it? It's not as though I'm just going to close my eyes to it. We can address these things, but can I let it not be the decisive factor in how I'm going to participate in things? So can I suspend it or release myself from the binds of it? Yeah, and then address what the core issue is towards that.
Yeah. And I think, it can be hard, but it's like, also what are the benefits of, trying to release it? And, you can always go back to it. Right. You can always go back to it if you want it.
Right. So what are the benefits of holding on to that resentment? Right. So even if right. So you could suspend it long enough to be present with somebody and then, go back to resentment if it's that important to you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's still there waiting for
but
you.
Why would you?
Right, exactly. Because in reality, if you only have 100 days and you spent 99 of those in resentment, well, that's the reality that you've shaped for yourself, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So if there is something bothering you that created that resentment, look towards that subject, but see if you can release yourself from that bond.
The hurt or resentment.
Right, because that resentment can sometimes prohibit us from being fully present.
Fully present emotionally.
Or present enough.
And sexually, right? So it's, I think you can deal with a number of ways, but it's one of the reasons why in our erotic, exotic staycation transformation, the first few sexy dates are about reconnecting emotionally and physically with your partner. And it's like a gradual thing. Like we're not going to jump into tying you up, but let's start with like reconnecting. and being present, more present with each other physically and emotionally through touch, sensory exploration, that sort of thing. So then that leads us to the third thing of being present, which is being sexually present.
Being sexually present. So when being intimate, does it feel like our body is fully there, or are we kind of like not quite there? And, again, these feelings inform us as to our position.
Right? Yeah. And I think you might say, of course I'm present. I'm right there. But then I think when you, you might be going through the motions, the idea, like, I think, as you said it earlier, hitting it and quitting it, trying to get it over with, because maybe it's something that you feel is an obligation. And I think, things to try. And I think this is part of, again, what we do in our program is like, what are the things that you can experience that might allow it to be different and for you to be more physically present? Like recently, we were in a situation with other people, and I was like, I started getting in my head thinking about, I'm not into it. What if I'm not into it? Or like, am I into it? Like, I was asking this question.
You're really in your head.
I was really in my head, which I know people use fantasy and that sort of thing to get yourself going, and that can be good. Yeah. But I think what I did actively in that moment is let me get back to the physical, sexual sensations. And it really shifted the energy for me. Yeah.
I think for me, when I try to get back into my body, I make a concerted effort to really focus on my five senses. I find that to be very helpful. So I will focus on what is it I'm looking at? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? What are the sounds that are going on? And it stops me from future forecasting, right? So the idea is that, am I going to be pleasing them enough, or am I going to be, big enough, strong enough, whatever the concern might be? And I'm no longer in the present. I'm not with you. I'm forecasted out. But when I bring myself back to those five senses, I can't help but be present. I am there, and then the magic really happens.
Yeah, it's almost like you're like out. You pick your sometimes what we do is we pick ourselves up outside of our body, and we're watching, just watching and performing rather than feeling. And I think the things really shift where you really start to pay attention to everything. And I think the big learning for me this year has been breath and breathing and relaxing. And I think if you get in touch back with your breath, it's such a huge thing. I mean, it's used in Tantra and some other things, but again, these are things we talk about in our program that we've excitedly experienced and, would love to share.
It makes me, love to share, because it's amazing. I think about somebody I dated a few years ago, and she suggested that I try to breathe through my penis, which I thought was absurd. I mean, here was this vulva owner explaining to me how to breathe through my penis. And I think I ridiculed it in some part of my mind.
Even when we started dating, you told me that story. You're like, breathe through my cock.
Whatever. And yet here we are, perhaps suggesting things to other people that they might also say, well, these two are like, they've gone off the rails. But now I come to realize, yes, I can, in fact, breathe through many parts of my body, including my penis, and it's wonderful. So remain open to the idea of it, the possibility of it.
Yeah, breathing and really feeling.
And being present.
Oh, I'm getting hot.
Wonderful. Hold that thought.
Hold that thought.
Just for a couple more minutes.
So, okay. So to recap, we talked about how being present, physically, emotionally, and sexually is number two, another way to reignite the fire in your long-term relationships. Yeah. I like being present.
It is.
So, nice. And like we also said, sometimes being present, it can be a bit scary.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Have you had situations where it's felt scary for you?
I have. I don't have to go back very far. There are times when I'm invited to go out and do something, and I'm wanting to go, but yet there are some concerns, some fears, some old fears of whatever kind of vulnerabilities you want to call it, but that I might not be interesting enough, that I might not say things that are engaging enough, or whatever the fantasy is. And sometimes it's not very well defined. It's just that feeling. And the initial impulse is to decline the offer as opposed to saying, you know what, I'm good enough as it is. We'll go and we'll figure it out. And then when I do allow for that expression, lo and behold, I go, it's fantastic. We figured it out, and it's remarkable. So it's that willingness to go beyond the certain levels of vulnerability, but it starts with that awareness and allowing for it.
Yeah.
But for me, it's that if I were to not allow for this, if I were to just stay in my feeling state of fear, well, then my universe starts to implode and my experience becomes smaller and smaller, and the fears kind of get solidified and they grow onto themselves and they become justified, even though they're simply feelings and not actually facts. Whereas when I go the other way and I say, wait, this is a feeling, maybe my past has indicated this, but it's not necessarily an indication of how things are going to be in the future. When I can allow for even a little bit of openness to that, then I can start to look beyond that and have new feelings, new experiences, and say, wow, this is survivable. And not only, in fact, was it survivable, it was enjoyable.
Right. So we want to encourage you to start by saying yes, to be present, to be present with your partners, and bring back the fire and sex and excitement.
Or
and
keep
pleasure.
it going if you've never lost it.
Keep it going or level
Maintain.
it up.
Sure.
I think
Level
these things
will
level it up too. Thanks everyone for joining us.
All right. Thank you.
That was a good one.
It always is. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to part 1 of the 5 ways to reignite the fire in long-term relationships. Today we talked about number 1, which is having some distance and spending time apart, and number 2, which was being present. Listen to the next episode for the remainder of the 5. If you want to explore polyamory, open up a relationship, or try your hand at swinging, we can help. Check out our website at taraandandre.com for information on our Poly Newbies digital course or our deeper dive open relationship and polyamory mastery program where you get direct coaching from us. There's also other individual and couples coaching options there as well. Thanks for listening to the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast with T&A. Don't forget to subscribe and give us some love on your favorite podcasting platform. You can check out the show notes for any of the links to the courses or information we talked about today. Thanks and have a fantastic and sexy day.